All right, wide receiver. Mark, take it away.
All right, so starting at number 5 again, working our way up. So at 5, I have Calvin Ridley. Now, if you've been following this podcast for any amount of time, you've seen that I've been pretty high on him since he's been in Jacksonville. The reason for that is obviously he had a year off last year due to a gambling suspension. This year, I made a kind of a joke that he's betting on himself. I think he's hungry. He's coming out trying to prove people wrong. And he's got Trevor Lawrence as his quarterback, and he has Doug Peterson, and he has a good tight end and receivers and running backs around him. So it's hard to just, focus on him. I think he's one of the best route runners in football. I think he's got some of the best hands in football, and he has, like I said, a hell of a quarterback and a hell of a play caller. So they're going to find ways to get creative and get him open, and he's a playmaker. In Atlanta, if you guys remember, few years back with Matt Ryan as his quarterback, he was like one of the top 3 or 4 receivers. I do anticipate him being a top 5 fantasy football receiver this year. And I think you could probably get him in like 3rd or 4th, maybe even 5th round of drafts this year. So kind of a sleeper in that sense, but also I do think he's a legitimate like top 5 receiver to pick. I think he'll be awesome. At 4, I have CeeDee Lamb. The Cowboys have brought in a couple of their weapons to go around CeeDee Lamb, which some people can see that as a downfall. I see it as an advantage. I think CeeDee Lamb, now that you have a guy like Brandon Cooks take the top off of defense, CeeDee Lamb's going to be that slot receiver. He's going to get a majority of the targets. Again, one of the best route runners in football, has after the catch ability. He's a touchdown machine. He's a big play machine, and Dallas loves him, and they love to get him the ball in a lot of creative ways. I just think that this guy, year in, year out, has been consistent in putting up big fantasy numbers. He's never truly been considered a top 5 guy. I think this year he is. At 3, I have Tyreek Hill. Simple thing, fastest guy in football. There is no matchup that is not favorable for him. Any kind of matchup that is not 2 guys on him is a win for him. And we saw what he did last year when Tua was healthy. You pair him with Jalen Waddle, who's another guy we'll talk about. Those 2 dudes, you can't double both of them, and whoever you don't double is going to have a big day. And even if you do double him, we've seen him run by 2 guys before. So Tyreek Hill, consistent home run guy, consistent big play guy, and he's going to get a shit ton of targets. And with Tua healthy again, and with Mike McDaniel and what they're doing offensively, I love it. 2, I have Cooper Kupp. Injured last year early in the season, but if you remember before that, he was the leading fantasy points getter in his, I don't know how many games he played. I want to say it was 4 or 5 games. He was
won the Triple Crown,
the year before that won the Triple Crown. Then last year played 5 games, was by far the leading points getter as for receivers, and I think just flat out the number 1 fantasy player through the first 5 weeks. He's a stud, man, and he's really the only consistent weapon the Rams have on that roster. Him and Stafford clearly have a great connection and great chemistry. I don't think the Rams are going to be very good, which means they'll be playing from behind a lot as well. Cooper Kupp's a guy that's not ever going to quit. He's going to continue to work, even if they are losing games. Stafford's kind of the same way as well. They don't have a quit in them. So if he remains healthy, which I think he will, he's going to be one of the top guys. Very, very, very hard to game plan against. Now, I will say, because of how weak they are around him, he might be getting a ton of attention in terms of double coverage, bracket coverage, but I've seen him pick those apart as well. So, and Matt Stafford's not afraid to throw in a double coverage. We've seen him do it forever with Megatron. And then the top guy, I don't think anyone can argue it right now, is Justin Jefferson. Now, I have some concerns with him. Some people say you could draft this guy number 1 overall. I wouldn't. He's been the top receiver in fantasy, I think, 2 years in a row. And the thing is, when that happens and everybody knows his production, you're going to try to do anything you can to take him out of the game plan. John, there's a clip in the film, if you want to pull it up, of what the Packers did to Justin Jefferson, and they held him to I think under 40 yards and maybe 3 or 4 catches. This is the kind of stuff I think is going to happen a lot, which is why you have to look out for Jordan Addison as another sleeper. We'll get into him as well. That's
double Justin. Oh yeah, is this what you were talking about?
No, there's a clip of the pack right here. Yeah. So you can kind of see the Packers did this pretty much the whole game. You have the best defender on the Packers roster in Alexander, pressing him, getting his hands on, taking him out of his comfort zone all game long. And then you have a safety that basically stands at about 15, 20 yards over him. And they did this no matter what. You can see that guy's cheating to his side.
Right.
Consistently. So they're not, and I think more teams will do this kind of thing because he's that good. And so at that point, in fantasy purposes, the Vikings offense weapons around him, like Hawkinson, like Jordan Addison, are good pickups. But Justin Jefferson's going to get his targets, man. He's going to make plays in double coverage, single coverage. It's just, I don't know if he has as big of a year as he's had the last couple of years, numbers wise, because everybody and their brother knows what the Vikings are trying to do. Yeah. So now they do get creative in how they get him the ball and stuff, especially down the red zone. I think he got tackled last year 7 times on the 1 yard line, which is unfortunate for owners of Justin Jefferson in fantasy. But yeah, I mean, you can't argue. I think he's the top guy.
Yeah. So my list here, number 5, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think, there's probably a little bit more hesitation around this pick last year, just because of the fact that nobody really knew if his production at the end of the season prior was a fluke or not. Clearly it wasn't. One of the hardest workers in football, one of the best hands in football, and wide receiver number 1 in Detroit. But the nice part is it's not because of his ability to take the top off or because he has insane speed or anything like that. It's because he is deadly in the middle of the field, which means a lot of targets, a lot of receptions. If you're in a PPR league, that's really good news, right? I mean, you consider the fact that he was getting like 8 or 9 receptions per game last season. And then, right, that's 9 points, not including the yardage, right? If you're in a PPR league. So definitely way up there on my list, a lot more than he was in prior years. Number 4 is AJ Brown. He was not on my list last year because we had, same thing, a lot of uncertainty around the Eagles. It's clear to me that their offense is a well-oiled machine that is going to be very difficult to be stopped. The only hesitancy that I had around putting him here is just how many weapons are on the Eagles offense. The ball is going to get spread around a little bit, but kind of as Mark said, that's probably an advantage, honestly, because of the fact that he's not going to be getting double covered or anything like that. And same situation where, he's really damn good in the middle of the field, which usually means a lot of targets. 3 for me, Jamar Chase. Look, simply put, Joe Burrow's number 1 receiver, number 1 target. And he's got a lot of help too. So I think he's going to rack up a lot of fantasy points, and very similar argument goes for Stephon Diggs. Added chip on his shoulder, I think, based off of kind of some of the actions we've seen with training camp and things like that. I think he feels, not only a lot of pressure, but a lot of motivation to perform. Josh Allen, being your quarterback helps quite a bit. And I don't think Josh Allen's going to be running quite as much as he was last year. And so for that reason, I think that he's actually probably going to be a top 5 receiver in the league this coming season. Then same as Mark, number 1, Justin Jefferson. As Mark said, I would probably advise taking him, first overall, or advise against taking him first overall or something like that. This is kind of a weird year where, I don't really want to be picking first, second, third, fourth, or fifth or anything like that this coming season, because I just don't think there's really that many guys that are just like so far above everybody else as far as production that I think that's worth it. With that being said, I mean, like I said, this is the closest thing I've seen to a player that reminds me of Calvin Johnson since Calvin Johnson retired. He is a guy that you need to literally dedicate 2 defensive players to covering him damn near all the time.
And even then, we've seen him make, like, the Lions, in the Lions game, I have nightmares of just bracket coverage. He runs a corner out. He makes a great adjustment on the ball, catches it, makes a guy miss, stays in bounds, and scores. They ruled him out of bounds. He was not.
He's incredible, and he catches everything that comes his way. I mean, the speed, the size, the hands, he is the best wide receiver in the NFL, if you ask me, and I think that's going to show up in fantasy production.